So we're on stage again, or behind the curtain, or what side of the curtain? Hi, Đejmi. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. Maybe to continue with this, confessional style of the video that we just watched. I wanted to ask you about the work, the reason why you're here. You're here as a recipient of the OHO Award for the Young Visual Artist in Slovenia, and trying to immediately contextualize your practice in the Slovenian contemporary art scene, and maybe to mention about the OHO, the avant-garde collective. Louder? Okay. Well, my question to you is, how do you contextualize your practice, Đejmi, in the context of, particularly in relation to what OHO Collective was doing in Slovenia? And do you OHO the same things? OHO is like a word that stands for wonder, right? That combines the word eye and ear when you listen and hear something. Things that surprise you or that you want to transgress, do you feel like they are the same?
Well, thank you for the question and everything that you did so far. Can you hear me well? It's okay? Okay, I will try my best. The question that Lilia posed, and I received it today, I was a bit kind of laughing at it. Mostly because she also asked what's the difference between OHO, this neo-avant-garde in the 1970s in Slovenia. No? Thank you. The question that Lilia posed today was what's the difference between neo-avant-garde collective, art collective, OHO, and the first thing that occurred to me was an anatomical difference between me and them, because all of them possess penis, and obviously I don't. And the second difference is that they actually somehow managed to exhibit their work in MoMA, I also think in 1970, no? And I exhibit my work today inside this church, talking about penises. But what we do have in common is the fact that that group actually had very short-lived artistic career. I don't know how long. That's... You missed the best part. And yeah, what we have in common is exactly that, the very short-lived artistic career. And why I was laughing when I read these questions today, because I also thought, first of all, I'm 34 and I'm already at somehow the finale of my artistic opus, because I was thinking to kind of quit or take a big break, or maybe just quit forever, because I also think that artist has to know when to stop, and that not all of us wants to continue this for the rest of our lives, because sometimes just not only that inspiration drains you out, but simply maybe it's time to give space to other artists who have something to say, and they can play a big or important role in future generations.
Great. But is this concept of reistic observing that they were practicing, trying to dismantle, to push the art into life, to sell something as matchboxes with artworks on it, still a relevant issue, you think, or have we already passed that point when the border between art and it being part of the regular life is still questionable or needs to be proved?
Well, in their case, no. Actually, they did somehow prove that no, not necessarily, because after they finished, they decided to somehow hide themselves in some sort of a remote village in Slovenia. I don't recall the name of the place. And they said, well, we can do this by just proving that life itself is an artwork itself. And we don't need an audience or we don't have to prove anything to wider public and people what we do, or that references and all this prestige behind certain artwork that are so well established is maybe not as relevant as it is what we do as individual artists in our own private spheres. But then depends again, like it depends what you want to achieve with your work. Who do you want to address, and where are you going next? What do you
Exactly.
All these questions are so pain in the ass. But
I also thought we would structure today's talk in like 3 parts, as it is titled, right? We titled the Ladder, the Veil, and the Looter. So the latter I see as a more like biographical artworks that we actually also have on view here, and we see that there several prints from the Zahida is a Feminist series, which is in the permanent museum in Vienna, in Musa Wien, in their collection. And it's wonderful to see your immediate like handwriting and these images that are staged so well, and the stories that tell so many familial lineages. And one of those images directly relates to the concept of a letter that I was curious in, and it tells the story of you being an elementary school student. I will probably let you expand this from here. Yeah.
Okay, that's the that's the image on your left. And I'm just gonna read it out loud, just so that you paint a picture how it started. I was in the beginning of my 3rd grade of elementary school when the teacher gave us a task to introduce ourselves to the class. We were supposed to write our names on the board, and the rest of the pupils had to write down each name in their notebooks. When it was my turn, she erased the name, saying to the whole class that it's forbidden to write it down because it's a Serbian name and it contains Serbian letter J, a letter that Slovenian alphabet doesn't have. It happened in the early 90s when Slovenia was finally declared as an independent country. Elmina, a friend of mine who shared the sitting place with me, said, "Đejmi, don't worry, I wrote down your name anyway." What to say? Well, it's obviously also that in the 90s, the former Yugoslav country came to its conclusion, or I would rather say dissolution, and the entire country collapsed. It consisted of 6 republics, and one of them was also Slovenia. So in the 90s, all of those countries had an intrinsical urge to somehow declare not only independence, but also to build nationhood. Even though it's very like false and questionable, but all of them try to define its own country also by excluding everything that doesn't fit into that frame of nationality. And this, like that case specifically, there were many cases like that, but it just shows on micro level how we, people who didn't fit in, were also part of the marginalized groups who somehow struggled with our own identities, and yeah, like.
So that goes to my question. I wanted to ask, the time when Slovenia gets independence, it's like 1991, you were 3 years old then, right? And it's like this, the narrative that's both constructed through your memories and lived experience, but also through the stories that are told to you, right? Because, and at some point you try to, make a cohesive narrative based of that. But I think that this artwork actually proves that the lived experience was quite vivid also.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I really managed to portray and transmit how cohesive it was. No idea. But my point was try to somehow convey what it does to individual in all this transition of people who are coming from one state of country to another, how to also build your own self, and what one goes through, like that, because you're never part of that. So you're always a foreigner in your own country where you're raised or born, and you always have to fight for your own position within one place. Because even like I was also living in Vienna, but there I really was a stranger, and I was like glad to be a stranger because finally I realized what that really means. Because if you're born in your own country but you're declared as somebody who's not part of that, it's a bit weird, it's a very schizophrenic situation.
And you're referring to the time you lived in Vienna when you studied during your master's?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a good what you mentioned, because I started to revise all this political situation at the age of 26. I forgot everything what happened, and my mentor in Linz, in Austria, Shink Dagmar, she said, why you don't make your personal stories? Because in Slovenia was important to not, if you deal with art, you should not deal anything that's very personal and subjective, which is very interesting because that also tells a lot how our very small Le Petit Bourgeois society in Slovenia is so conservative, and most of the people who occupy the space in academia are men. And once you, if you realize that all these men are trying to pertain art world that's not supposed to be personal and subjective, especially from one position, it means also that they want to keep their status quo. So if a woman talks about her issues, as she's supposed to, it just gives them space to stay where they are. So they also always stay on the power position. Because, once you start to use your brain, once you start to become critical of whatever social issues you're dealing with, it becomes dangerous for society. And women or also artists should not speak about these things. So we have actually culture of repression.
Or we have to speak in different languages about
yes,
this.
Always wrap it up. Let it be metaphorical. Let it be symbolic. Let it be. Let's play with allegories, which is totally fine and acceptable. But to which extent? Then how do you speak up once and for all for also other people?
Well, when I looked at some of the images in the series, Zahira as a Feminist, and also the video that is currently on view, and the image that we used for the promotion of the stock, you facing the camera with your back and wearing a beautiful headscarf tied at your back, it reminded me of my own grandmother and like women in Orthodox Christianity. The tradition is that you wear this scarf whether you go to church or not. For the age of like my grandmother, it was common. There is an artist, Ukrainian artist Yelena Subach, who recently did a wonderful series of photographs picturing exactly those women who wear this beautiful ornate, headscarves, and she looks at these women as almost like a subculture who have their own traditions and rumors and have their own ways to rebel against the society, which I found, I know, very touching. This very little detail that you capture in the outfit of your grandma. I don't know where this question leads me to, but we are like slowly progressing to the idea of the veiling and
veiling, unveiling. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, it's quite persistent in my work, but I'm not sure if you will see it in these photo prints. But if like I also deal a lot with photographs that women are covered in either hijab or veil itself. And that was very particular for a region of Bosnia and Herzegovina, also part of the former Yugoslavia. And it was not very well accepted in the time, in 1950. And you can see this parallel line with Turkey as well, when Ataturk banned veil in public audience. And this was perceived back then as something very progressive. But the question appears, of course, and it is also what I want to say with my work, is like, who decides for you how you gonna wear your hijab, or in Sarajevo particularly it was called niqab or zar. So it was always related to colonial power of people on power positions to tell you either you should wear it or not. So it was very rarely individual or female decision. And what happened in back then in 1950 in Sarajevo was that there was established anti-fascist female front, and they were going from village to another village, campaigning and advocating for women to get rid of the veil, because they were perceived also as very illiterate and women who are not capable of having their own voice and to govern for themselves. What they lack was this sensibility and understanding for these communities, that most of the women didn't feel comfortable getting rid of that veil. And they did it very forcefully, actually, because they just wanted to integrate them in socialist system, communist system, so that everybody somehow looks united, the same. And it also presented in a way a danger to all the rest of the people.
So veil in opposition to civilization, in quotation marks, can we talk about that as a way of othering?
Yes. Yes, exactly. It's a very good point of yours, because this trend then appeared again, like the entire resurgence of veil happened also recently in Egypt, and women perceived it as well as a sign of resistance against colonialism.
Can you maybe tell us more about those? We haven't seen those, but for those of us who will go to your website later on and see maybe the series of photographs that you worked with, when you like just expose a tiny bits of human body, you can see maybe like a belly button, but the rest of the photograph is just drapes of black fabric. I wonder if you want to a little bit elaborate on this series, how you, like, who are the people in these photographs, whether it's important for you to narrate their stories.
No, not really, because the subject behind the veil is not that important. For me, it was more, the focal point was just to expose what it's supposedly have to be hidden, and those are exactly the female body parts, like breasts, how you call it? Nipples, yeah, thank you. And that's exactly, if I refer to what I said before, it's something that's supposed to be hidden, but then you ask yourself, who is the one who decides what should be hidden and what for? So I play it like this project is very ambiguous, because it's not also advocating pro-veil, but it's not also against the veil. So it's really individual choice in the end, who can do it or not. and nobody's there to force.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not superior to anyone, and I should not decide for anyone in this room or elsewhere to either do it or not. But it's, even if you do not wail, of course, it's not something that it's a sign of civilization or progress,
Mm-hmm.
or liberalism.
I want to switch to this video again and to ask you to tell us more about who Zahida is. I'm thinking of word colonialism in a different context. Maybe there is a moment in this film where your grandma sits in front of, in her room, on a couch, in the corner of a couch, in front of a table which is like polished glass, and we see her reflection in the glass. It's a beautiful shot, but it made me think of a completely different topic about the American colonial art of the early times. And James Copley, for example, one of the painters who had this he painted portraits of people who came all the way to America, almost like to recreate the world from a seed. You know, there was like a woman holding a plant in her hands, and if you are supposed to read this, the reflection as well as a depiction of the woman itself, and to understand about this world in transition, world in the making, that's being recreated in the other continent. It's like, yeah, this mysterious moment in this video was Zahida sitting and observing, not observing actually her own reflection, but you can sense the existence of a different reality that's maybe like you're trying to grasp on, or to tell about these like different worlds that she's embodying as just one person. What are these worlds that she lived through?
I have no idea what I wanted to portray with that image of her reflection in the table. It just happened. I thought it's very aesthetical.
Mm-hmm.
But the entire film essay, you just have to like take time and have a look at it. The point is that I really try not her to be. She is of course protagonist, but she is not excessively talking and explaining her life story. Images talk on its own, and they're very silent. So the bigger point of this film was not to make war as something a spectacle. She's an old lady, and her life is very boring and mundane. But as a subtext, you maybe realize that she's also a woman who went through a lot of struggles without any antidepressants or psychological counseling, but she still managed to stand stoically. Just rotate to your heads, thank you. Like this is her, this is grandma, and this is depiction of Balkan woman, you know, that was in the last 20 years depicted as a victim of the war. And that was the only presentation that we have faced through Western media. And yes, it is the fact that there was a genocide in Srebrenica. It is the fact that there was war. It is the fact that people were raped. It is the fact that people were murdered, and so on, just like I also said in that video that you saw before. But people forget that these women were so, they built big solidarity among each other, and they dealt with it with such a strength. And they were also illiterate. They were not part of academia, so they had a practical feminism going on their terrain. And they survived, and they're like, I mean, fine. No, it's not that they have very romantic life, but still, they govern for themselves, they speak for themselves, and yeah. It's something that's forgotten in literature to mention, and we have 3 moments of depiction of Yugoslav woman, and especially after the war, like post-transitional, post-Yugoslav woman. That is one of a victim, and second was portraying as a victory woman in Yugoslavia, because they were like working hard. They were portrayed as a women who were occupying the public space when it comes to all other professions, not only mother, a teacher, nurturer, and so on. And the third one, what happened was after, in post-Yugoslavia, was in turbofascism, a term coined by Žarana Papić. She was an intellectual from Sarajevo, and unfortunately she also made a suicide, but this is very debatable, we don't know. Maybe she was also removed by Milosevic regime because she was a very dangerous woman who spoke for herself, and she was very critical of Milosevic regime back then. When she coined that term, turbofascism, she claimed that it's not problematic to use such heavy words because fascism was used for sure in the First and Second World War. But if we count how many women were raped back then, it's approximately 20,000 to 50,000. She said that this is not something that we should hide, and not being afraid of using such heavy terms. And what happens was exactly that because of the implication of Western media and using all this, how to call it, beauty magazines and everything was somehow imposed in the 90s to all those women. They started to alter their bodies. The very important music, turbo folk. There was a resurgence of turbo folk music. It's very like trivial music that a lot of women got into it, swept in. So they started to use their body as a body capital. So they became like a movable bodies, again used by men. What was an emancipatory moment of those women who used their body as a capital was that despite the fact that they were also in a way operated by men, they still gain wealth through their body, and eventually they, through such huge accumulation of money through mafia and other very violent members, male members of that society, they managed to build schools, they managed to educate their children, they managed to invest money in public spaces and so on. So still, despite the fact that they were not educated, despite the fact that they use their body for certain purposes, they still knew how to use it for greater good, not only for themselves.
And speaking of body, can you remember when did you decide that you have interest in performance as an art practice? Or,
Why do you want to know? Where are you heading with this question?
I think I'm trying to unpack maybe a bit the work that we saw, yes, and the other work that I wasn't able to witness, but I have a feeling that your practice is very much driven by the performance.
I did only a couple of times performances, and the only reason I did it was because I just felt that this was the right moment to express certain ideas, but I'm not a big fan of that because I have a very big fear of public presentations in general. So time-based media as an art can really help to convey certain ideas, political ideas, while at the same time, in my case, I could also camouflage my fears and insecurities because you can record your voice, or you can record yourself in the video and have a video performance. Because I'm not a professional actress, I never went to any acting schools, and how to you can use media into your own advantage to conceal certain things, which is not the case in art talks like this.
And when you do photography, do you collaborate with people, or you're all these photos, let's say here, I'm curious to hear more about how they were produced, and if they are like a sequence of an image that then you selected for this particular print, or do you come with a particular composition that you want to create and stage the people in the works in a particular set, in front of a particular building?
That project happened in 2016. It was funny how it came out because I was dealing with something completely else. And then again, Shing Dagma, my mentor, said, please stop doing what you're doing. It sucks. Please start doing something subjective and personal. And I was in Bosnia back then with my parents, so I actually included my own family members, as if maybe it's obvious to some, maybe not. So in that photo there is my grandmother. Yeah, she's just there. I just told her what she has to do. In other one, there's my father. The first photo, okay, this is me. Here's my mother, and that one I don't see. Aha, it's me again. I'm all over the place.
That's you, yeah.
I just involved them because I thought it's the right thing to do, and first of all, because I don't have to pay them. It's very simple, but at the same time, not really, because none of them are very used to cameras and things like that. And I did it out of boredom. But I was inspired by Parajanov, actually. I know it's not the same. I'm not really... I can't compare myself to him and his work, but all these colorful things and ornaments, cultural ornaments, are visible thanks to him. He was my point of reference. And I did it back then with camera for beginners. And yeah, everything is staged. It was a bit taught before I did certain things, but also they are very spontaneous as well.
Even the television set in the garden?
Yeah, my father likes to collect stuff. So this I found in our house. Nobody's using the TV, and there's a field of corns, and I just said, like, let's put a TV. I mean, I know why I used it. I know where it comes from, but I thought, why not using something that's already there? So, okay. Like, I can't hire professionals or pay for the equipment. I just deal with art, what it's in front of me. Because it would be a pity not to use ideas just because you don't have resources. So you have to, from zero, you have to create something.
Opening it up. I want to jump to this quote from your statement to auto-portrait work in 2017, the work you did, where you say, war is a legacy of any repression of feeling. Every war begins as an external event, but already lives inside of us. And I've been thinking about it a lot as the Ukrainian, the person who lives through the war at the moment, and think about how you usually in the statements describe yourself as a post-war artist. And us meeting here today, you know, referencing this just like state of human, like tumultuous moment in life. And is this question completely resolved for you, that you are a post-war artist because of where you're coming from, or the events that occur then in other parts of the world, do they like involuntarily force you back into certain like topics and thoughts and traumatic feelings, let's say it this way?
What was the question?
Yeah, think about it, post-war artists in the time when that's...
Yes. That's actually a famous quote by Croatian writer Slavenka Drakulić. I read I read all of her books. I don't remember the titles, they are really good, but she also she faced a lot of criticism from so many people because, of course, some of them were communist, and she was accused of being very pro-West and US, but I wouldn't agree with that at all, because if you really read her books, you realize that she's a woman who tries to bring both worlds and speak from several perspectives, especially because she, if you know her autobiography, you know that she's already a child who was raised and born by, or conceived by a father who was atheist and uneducated farmer, and on the other side there was a mother who was bourgeois, very educated, but at the same time very religious. So she was always a bit confused, especially in the time of communism, when you're raised like this, because it was also, well, in her case, was not, in Yugoslavia in general, was not very well accepted to be religious and to practice religious, especially in public. So many people were hiding this, which is not good as well. And she understood that well because her grandfathers were also always in the war, like Yugoslavia, and before Yugoslavia there was Kraljevina SHS, I don't know, monarchy of Serbians and Croats and so on. So this territory was always going through wars. Even if, like, I like one quote from the movie, it's called Halima, and one woman says, look at these fucked up buildings, they are so deteriorated. This is the picture of us because we kill each other every 25 years. So, I mean, I don't know if it really is 25 years, but yes, we do kill each other every once in a while. And there is peace and there is war again. So that's why post-war artist, I don't know if I can put that away from myself. I cannot say I'm a war artist because I haven't faced war directly, as it is now in Ukraine. I was always absent and passive participant and observant. So therefore post-war. But yes, I also mentioned this in my silent observant video. You don't know when another war is going to happen.
Yeah, like you have the space in the video, right? You repeat it 3 or 4 times, even when you name the countries, and by the time the video ends, we are like living in
exactly,
like a repetitive
Ukraine, yeah, and people, those who didn't experience war, sometimes, because it's different world. 2 years ago, they asked me at the job interview, like, what is your biggest fear? What will happen with this gallery? What is your biggest fear? That some artworks will not be exhibited if you work as a curator or assistant? And I said, another war. And they were all shocked, because like, we are in Vienna. And then, that interview happened in September, and then it was a February, and war break up in Ukraine. So if you live that, you know it's going to happen. It's just a question where. So yeah.
Yes, because for some, like for me who didn't live that, I was still in denial, I would say, up until the very last day, like 2 weeks before Natalie called me, and I said, like, no, I don't know how to respond to this, because their lives seemed very normal and under control, obviously. Maybe, yeah, exactly. I'd like to open it up to questions from you now, or comments, or if you want us to focus on any particular images that are still new.
I think it'd be interesting just to give a very brief overview of your PhD, because it's a very important part of your work as an artist. Could you do that?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad that Natalie brought this up, because once we spoke, and she reminded me that, if may I, she said that you should say this out loud in audience. I don't like to speak about the fact that I'm doing my PhD because it's still not finished. So if something is not finished, I'm a bit insecure. But I will have my PhD defense in June. And the topic is sexuality and its manifestation in post-Yugoslav cinema. And I'm looking for a publisher. And thank you, Natalie, really, because it's good always to have some support, and some people know how to do it. That was very brief.
What was your family's reaction after they saw this?
The
photo?
stuff? Thank you. I'm glad you asked this, because so many people wonder, not many want to ask, but few did. I get very big support from my parents. And when my grandmother was still alive, she was like, yeah, sure, we're gonna film all this. Actually, it's funny anecdote, because she was working at a school as a cleaning lady, but she said, like, I know how it works because I observed these professors, so for me it's so natural. But funny as well was that in that Vareš, in her hometown, that's a region where Angelina Jolie came in her garden. No, it's that garden where it happens in that movie, where it's me in my red dress and behind it's my grandmother. It was this specific garden that she came there because she needed to film for the movie titled "In the Valley of Honey and Blood." Mm-hmm. And they were filming it in that Vareš, in that town, and she also offered her symbolic amount of money because my grandmother complained to all those filmmakers, and she was like, what the hell are you doing? This is my garden, this is my territory, please, go out. And they were laughing. They just found her a very sympathetic woman. Still, she understood. For her it's fine, and she is a woman who seriously went so many things through that. For her it's not big of a deal to expose these things in public. For father is the same because he's her son, but my mother would say, like, why you have to say all these things, let's keep something to ourselves. Yes.
I'm curious about the practice. Do you, by doing all this kind of stuff and using the plant-based as your approach towards all these very big topics and very heavy ones, do you like strive towards building a kind of healing space within the practice itself, where these traumas can get transformed and potentially, I don't know, like lead to something else?
No, I thought so. I was very naive when I thought that this could lead to any transgenerational trauma healing, but say.
What I see is you have this very interesting subjectivity and you're very direct about it, which is very powerful. But also I'm thinking that there are not many, but some people, that have a similar, not the same, but that maybe would need some kind of place where they can speak up. So I was thinking perhaps, I mean, it's just an idea that came across by listening to all of you and knowing something from the context you come from.
Yes.
That like if we can possibly imagine our practices in a way that can open up a space for someone else as well, and which could be our like kind of partners in crime, let's say, in the topics we are trying to address, and to also like building a small community around it could help. Could be very beautiful at the same time.
This it does exist. I have to say, one is in Belgrade. They're called Žene u crnom, or Women in Black. Those women it's also a very strong association of those who helped all the refugees from former Yugoslavia. They were really doing so much to receive all those women and refugees. And they were against war, they were against any military intervention, and they were against nationalism. So thank you for asking this, because this is very important to mention, since, there's war, there's a lot of nationalism, but many women in all those former Yugoslavia were against it. And for me as well, it's important to claim that Serbians also helped. They were not only those who perpetrated the violence, but there are also those on the other side who are pro-pacifists. That's one association, and thank you very much for reminding me to say that. There's another one in Sarajevo. They're called Crvena Association, which means red, and it stands for communism and red color. They did a lot to offer safe space for women. They talk. For the last 30 years, women do talk, but it's also very difficult. It's a very traumatic experience because you always revive same emotions. Just like, for me, it's not easy to have art talk all the time, speaking about all this trauma. It's very sensitive. I mean, it's not like an objective topic that you can just learn by heart and give it to people. You always have to go through a variety of emotions. Anyway, that's that. Yes, and now. Yes. Yes.
So I wonder if there's any like symbolism that you use this way of presentation, like the scroll, like the oath, and they are printed on fabric, and this way of handwriting.
Yeah.
This way of like presentation, is there certain meaning for people?
Yeah. It is, but I'm not sure if I manage to give that to audience, if I really manage to transmit it, because I use cotton. It reminded me of cotton handkerchief that you usually wipe your tears. So because of all these personal stories, I thought maybe cotton is the right material. But that's the thing. I don't know if I achieved that moment of handkerchief, tears, cotton story that usually people can get maybe touched or not.
I feel really like somehow really soft and very domestic. That's what I get. So, because of all the work that presented here, basically that in this format. I'm just curious of what's your reasoning behind it.
So you said domestic, soft.
It's
Yeah.
just it has a really like natural, unfinished kind of maybe because it just like this kind of cotton is not even bleached. It's not. It's like the kind of that really remind me of when you make before, like say when you make like the very hook to the really high end clothes, and you use this fabric to make the model first as some kind of like a fitting for the final clothes that they're going to make. So I'm just curious. So, and what was your like handwriting? And then you talked about this. They are actually camp. So, there's some kind of connection there, but just I cannot really like articulate it. But it's interesting. So I want to ask.
Thank you, and no idea what to reply.
It reminds me a little bit of this like how do they call this? They call it gobelin. It's
tapestries, yeah.
Tapestries usually in homes in Eastern Europe are quite present. I think what you're referring to is maybe it has that kind of
Why?
materiality in the way you communicate things.
Like the second skin almost, I get the reference of the bed sheets also, worse, like something that's comforting and wraps you in. But the writing on these is like, they seem to be like a diaristic writings, but they go so deep into history. Like you literally like bring us decades before, right? Like delving in the stories of your father, who came from where. Writing with this family tree. I think, Lulu, what you also wanted to say about the form of a scroll, right? That's something that you can roll, unroll.
It's just
And
like for me, as visually and also in terms of like installation in the space, it seems very particular.
mm-hmm.
This form, like, and also there's some kind of like, I don't know, maybe just they are so somewhat really uniform. So there's also a sense of like it's raw, but also preciousness. Maybe the photograph and like the it's like you have the printed photograph with somewhat good resolution, but then it's on the like fabric. It's not even like there's that wrinkles and this contrast. So something interesting happening on the surface, and plus with like this scroll, that's also something like yes, you almost like
Right.
like they can be they can be rolled up and
You can protect them in a way, like
yeah.
conceal them.
And also like so like you hang it in the space and some on the wall and I guess it's also that kind of that this like on the wall somehow give me a sense of like it can be like you see like can be like some kind of family in a family home with like a word decoration, and it's precious not in a sense of a value of itself, but more like in almost like for some kind of like a memory, like those are sentimental value.
That's very well said.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Just as valuable.
I forgot to ask about the books because we talked about letters, and I get curious whether letters and language is interesting for you just on a formal level. Even the project that you did in 2021, the post-pandemic book, Private Thoughts in Public Crisis. We don't have an image of it here, but
No, because it's not even important. I have text, I can read it,
Yes.
but I don't know. How do you feel? Do you want to hear it? Are you tired? The boss says. Yes, that's the book I made part of the residency in Slovakia. I supposed to go to Palestine in like 2 years ago, when again that war happened, as always, all the time. And since I wasn't there, I couldn't really talk anything about from their perspective. I didn't make a proper research, so I only observed the situation from the distance. And I made a book. It's white with, again, white letters that are somehow engraved on the paper, and only 10 texts appear inside, like 10 pages, very short text, and the rest of the book is entirely empty. But other people can, through QR code, interfere and post their own thoughts through social media, Instagram particularly. And I play with, from again, a white privileged person perspective, and I will start. And when you feel fed up, let me know. Probably you won't. Okay, start like this. I posted a comment on Facebook expressing my opinion on occupation in Palestine. I vented my anger by smashing the keyboard. Next page. I'm watching the war in Gaza through social media. I'm watching. I printed out some well-designed flyers with cool slogans and eye-catchy logo about the war in Jerusalem. I had a Zoom meeting with political activists, so I matched the colors of my clothes with the interior. I was ironing my white cotton shirt made in Bangladesh while listening to a podcast on casualties in Tel Aviv. I went out for some groceries. I bought some avocados and didn't care where they come from. I saw in the news they're bombarding Sheikh Jarrah. I light up my cigarette and stared into the ceiling. I signed the online petition against apartheid in Palestine. Then I reached out for my visa and went shopping. I ordered a glass of Prosecco when I heard how many people died. It was a rough day. I hear someone crying. Shall I take food delivery? Let me check the menu. That was the last one.
Hokus. Yeah, like the Japanese poetry, short and
Yeah,
piercing. You know.
Yeah.
I like the form of it.
Haiku.
Haiku. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think of that before.
It really precisely captures this, like, the embodied knowledge versus the disembodied experience. Like you're like can be like in one place, like thinking about a totally different world and still grappling with your own physicality.
And yeah, like not. How you call that in French? Not giving a fuck. But it's part of our existence. So not everyone has to have social responsibility to everything, because we can't. That was also part of that silent observer video. That how can each of us as an individual do something for anything that's happening, because we are so occupied with ourselves, with our own issues, problems, and things like that. So don't feel guilty, I guess.
Thank you so much, all. Thank you, Đejmi. This was beautiful. Yeah.